123 years ago, a nation, before it was a nation, decided to give all its female citizens the right to vote. 74 years later, the last European nation to follow suit did so. And last year, the last nations on earth introduced that change for the first time. Today, the Vatican City is the last bastion of the exclusive male franchise. 123 years and counting between the first and the last. Historically, such ideas and concepts have taken time to take hold. Such rights, even when established and accepted, even when enshrined in international law, take time to appear in reality. And the freedom they safeguard, the freedom for every human being to reach their full potential, is fragile. So like a cart without a horse, those ideas, those human rights, that freedom alone is inadequate. They need defending, they need enabling, they need advancing. So when we talk of disabled people's rights, we must also talk about the how as well as the what. Not just protection, but empowerment. Not just expectation, but delivery. Not just aspiration, but opportunity. And today, we have an unprecedented opportunity. In developing nations, the collective financial purchasing power of disabled people is immense. Around the world, their talents are compelling. They are the most entrepreneurial people on earth. They are the most relevant individuals to the priorities of governments around the globe. Productivity, prosperity, competitiveness, and their commonality and their community across nations is unparalleled. In the UK, the combined spending power of disabled households is over 200 billion. Closing the UK's disability employment gap would boost our economy by 35 billion. Over a quarter of the UK's new employment allowance scheme last year went to disabled entrepreneurs, and across developed nations, 14% of disabled, economically engaged people are self-employed or business owners, double the number of non-disabled. The world is more interconnected than ever before. Channel 4's Yes I Can video was watched by every nation on earth. We're wealthier, healthier, and believe it or not, the world is more peaceful. Yet against those opportunities and the socio-economic power that community has in developed nations, we still have an aching gap between the theory and the practice. In the UK, we have the Equalities Act, we have anti-discrimination legislation, and we spend way above the OECD average in support, and yet we have poor planning, we have poor design, we have poor build and poor enforcement, which means accessibility falls far short. If you're a wheelchair user living in a rural area, you would have to let 10 taxis pass by before one came along you were able to use, and you may be charged a premium for your trouble. If you are fortunate enough to support one of the handful of football clubs which has accessible stadium and a changing places loo, you may still not be able to enjoy the game with your mates. The disability employment rate lags at 33% behind the general population. Still, we fail to recognise and report disability hate crime. People have to put up with one-size-fits-all equipment and services often designed and run by disabled people, which have the power to transform quality of life, quality of care and provision, are often stifled by local government bureaucracy. There is a dearth of products and services in the public and private sectors, and scopes Extra Cost Commission shows that disabled people are being shortchanged, especially by the energy and insurance markets. And elsewhere in the world, these challenges look trivial. I recognise that much has been done, but there is still so much to do. So why has progress not been quicker? Why are things slow to take off? And what needs to happen to make the change and give the momentum we need to make rights a reality in experience? This conference has discussed many necessary solutions, but I would point to the failure of societies to recognise three simple truths. Firstly, that it matters to us all. The immense human cost, potential wasted, opportunities denied, ambitions thwarted. The costs to government, that people are not able to contribute to their society. Higher welfare, care and health costs, and lost tax revenue. And the cost to business, a neglected customer base, growth stifled, and skill and talent beyond reach. For all our nations to reach their full potential, every one of our citizens must also reach theirs. Secondly, we must recognise that this can be done. In the UK, we're educating our future designers, including inclusion and accessibility in mainstream education. Housed at the 2012 Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park, we have just launched a global disability innovation hub to share good practice and design across many sectors around the world. All our nations have a new sophisticated approach to international development based on empowerment and economic development. In the UK, we're producing a green paper very shortly, a joint paper between work and health to ensure that support and interventions are there when they're needed. And in my tenure in this post, I will empower disabled people as consumers. My focus will be to give them the tools to lever their economic power, and business the gumption to recognise that missing out on customers and talents is just dumb. We will radically revolutionise the information accessible to the public on accessibility, building on the work and in partnership with organisations such as Ewan's Guide that many of you saw earlier today. And we will create a culture in which everyone feels a responsibility to push, to report, and to vote with their wallets. We must find a better way to enforce the Equalities Act than to require a person to challenge that business or sue them, which is quite an obligation if you're just after a pizza for your tea. And where further legislation is required, we will introduce it. We must increase political participation, the number of disabled people in leadership roles in business and in civil society. And we need to identify leadership in each sector, in employment, and to act as consumer champions. And we need to turbocharge the efforts of entrepreneurs who get both the opportunity and the social imperative. Third and finally, it requires all of us to help, not just including business, but especially business. The reach of governments and international bodies is limited. The British Council has about 100 offices worldwide. That is dwarfed by the Confucius Institute, which has ambitions of a global footprint of 1,000 by 2020. Consider and contrast those giants of soft power projection with just one UK business, Marks and Spencer. It has 1,300 stores in 40 nations, and we need it to export more than just marmalade and knickers. Marks and Spencer's recognised, with the help of public pressure and smart management, that it ought to be extending its product range to cater for certain unmet needs. Easy change clothing for older children. They are also recognizing the importance and value of disabled people in their workforce. Their power to influence and demand similar standards from their suppliers is considerable. And it is absolutely in business's interest to progress this agenda. And many UK companies are, and many companies in your own countries are too. So government will take a more consumer approach to disability, empowering the customer through information, choice, and consumer pressure, and empowering the supplier through economic awareness, expertise, and support. From a revamped disability confidence scheme that we will launch shortly to a one-stop shop for expertise and advice. It's time we harness the power disabled people have to create a virtuous circle of more financial independence and the choices that come with it, and competition between businesses to meet those rising expectations. I would suggest that it might not have taken 123 years for the concept of women's suffrage to catch on if women at the time had had a greater share of the economic, social, industrial, and political power. Let us recognise the same is true of this agenda. Thank you.